Okay, hi everyone, welcome to Practical English. Today we are going to be learning English with a podcast called This American Life. And I think podcasts are an amazing resource for English language learners because they're very flexible. You can download them, you can have them on when you're commuting, on the train, on the bus. If you're driving your car, you can listen to them in your car. And they're also flexible in how you listen to them. If you're listening, you can slow them down, you can speed them up. A lot of podcasts will have a transcript, which is kind of a script. It says all of the words that are said. So if you're at home and you're finding it a bit difficult to listen to a podcast, you can always have a podcast in your ears and read along at the same time. And the last thing is there's just so many really good podcasts out there. So whatever you're interested in, you can find something to listen to that's going to interest you. So when we look at podcasts on Practical English, we always try and find podcasts that, I personally really loved listening to. And so the story today is going to be quite a sad story, but it's also really a gripping story. And it's also a true story, which I think is very interesting, about a part of the world I don't personally know lots about and I've never kind of been to. So it was really eye-opening for me in a lot of ways. What we recommend is you can watch this video. It's like a primer for the podcast. And once you've watched this video, you should have quite a good idea of what the story of the podcast is, some of the key language in this podcast. So when you go and listen to the real thing, you can listen to it all the way through and you can understand it or understand most of it and understand the main ideas of what's going on. So it's supposed to be kind of a primer for you to go and listen to the whole episode of this podcast. In this video, we're going to take a look at the introduction part of the whole podcast, and then in future videos we'll look at some later bits. In the introduction of any kind of story, not just a podcast, you need to know what the setting is, who the main people in the story are, what they want and why they want it, and maybe why it's so important for them. And also we have to make you care a little bit. So there's lots of things going on in the introduction of a story. And so today we're going to have a look at this introduction, and I think it sets up a really good story. So let's jump in. So for this first clip, we're going to be kind of introduced to what the topic of this podcast is, what this podcast is about. In this story, the main thing the people in the story are after is to win a lottery for a green card. Now, a lottery is something, it looks a little bit like this, okay? You might have seen one like this before. And it's anything where you're randomly choosing a winner is called a lottery. And so in this particular lottery, it's a lottery for a green card. A green card is a card, unsurprisingly, and it's green, okay? It's a little green card like this. But if you have one of these cards, it means you're allowed to live and work in the United States. So for a lot of people, that's a really valuable thing to have. This whole podcast episode is about someone trying to win this lottery, he wins the lottery, to get this green card and move to the United States. The last bit of language we need to know for this clip is an internet cafe. And these are more popular in some parts of the world than others. You might not have many where you are. They might be very popular where you are. But this is basically a place where you can go and you can rent a computer with the internet for 15 minutes, half an hour, however long it takes to get what you need to get done online. This is often going to be a lot cheaper than having your own computer and using the internet at home. So let's jump into the clip.
Every year in the fall, in countries all over the world, signs go up advertising a lottery. A lottery whose winners move to the United States, get a green card, and become Americans. And though that might sound crazy to you and impossible,
everybody know. I mean, everybody. The sign is all over on the street, all over in the stores, in the shops, everywhere you pass, you see it.
That's Reuben Henry, who runs an internet cafe in Liberia. The lottery application is online, so internet cafes are where lots of people apply. They're the ones who put up the signs advertising it. This year, Reuben says over 1,000 people put in applications at his place. He doesn't know any Liberian who hasn't heard of it.
Okay, so we have a good idea about what this lottery is and what it's for. So next we're going to meet Abdi, and Abdi is a refugee who is living in Kenya. And a refugee is someone who has left one country or escaped a country and moved to another country. Not necessarily because they want to, but because it was dangerous to stay in that first country. Either because there's like a war or a famine or something bad is happening there where they absolutely had to leave and go to another place. Okay, so in this next clip, we're going to meet the main character of this story. His name is Abdi, and he's a refugee living in Kenya. And at the start of the story, Abdi has already found out he's won this lottery to get a green card to move to the United States. And so for this clip, there's a few bits of language you might want to know. The first one is to not know the half of something. We use to not know the half of something when you don't know how many bad things are going to happen to you. We don't really use this for good things too often. In this clip, they say he didn't know the half of it. And that basically means he doesn't know all of the things that are going to happen to him, all of the problems he's going to encounter in the near future. The next one is perch. This is to perch is a verb, and it basically means to sit on the edge of something. So in this clip, they're talking about TV perched, and so that means you can kind of imagine it's a little bit precarious. It might fall off at some point. It's kind of on the edge of something else. And the last bit of language we might want to know is a nickname. And a nickname is basically a special name. Often your friends might give you a nickname, and it's maybe a descriptive. And so Abdi's nickname among his friends is Abdi the American, and we'll take a look at why that's the case.
Moving to America seemed like a done deal, but he didn't know the half of it. Abdi is who our show is about today, and winning the lottery was an especially big deal for Abdi because, really more than anybody he knew, Abdi had been obsessed with America since he was little. As a kid, growing up in Mogadishu, Somalia, he would go to the movies, which in Mogadishu just meant a TV perched on a table in a shack. And he would bring a pen and paper to watch American films so he could write down any words he didn't know and learn the language better. He became known to people as the guy who could translate the movie for you. Stuff would happen on screen and everybody would turn to Abdi, who would shout out, "He says he's about to kill that guy." He pronounces English like an American. That's why his accent is so amazing when you hear him. Which led to his nickname that all his friends called him.
Abdi the American. That's my name. That's my nickname.
Okay, so we've learned a little bit about Abdi and what he likes about America and why he wants to live there, because he really loves English and he loves speaking English, and maybe he wants to teach English. Now we're going to have a look a little bit about why he wants to leave. Abdi's a refugee, which is someone who has left a place because it would be dangerous for them to stay there. And so we're going to learn a little bit about why that's dangerous. So he's a refugee from a country in East Africa called Somalia, and he's living in a country just to the south called Kenya. And so in Somalia, there's a lot of civil war, a lot of bad things going on. And so he had to leave. It was dangerous for him to leave. So we'll learn a little bit about why that is. For this clip, there's a few bits of language you might want to know. The first one is a warlord, and a warlord is maybe similar to a general or someone with an army, but a warlord maybe shouldn't have the army or doesn't have the army legitimately. So in a place where the government isn't very strong, you might have warlords and they will just have a big army and basically do whatever they want, and often they'll do very bad things with all that power. Kind of related to that is this idea of anarchy. And literally, anarchy just means a place where there isn't a functioning government. And so in this clip, they do use anarchy to mean that. But we also use this clip to just mean somewhere where things are very chaotic and all over the place. So when I was teaching in a kindergarten, people might phone me and say, "How was work?" And I was like, "Oh, it's anarchy." And obviously, I don't mean there's no government there. I just mean things are very wild and chaotic there. And so when they talk about anarchy here, they do literally mean anarchy. There isn't a working government, but they also mean things are very chaotic and bad in a lot of ways. The last bit of language to look at is flee the country. Flee is another word, it basically means run away from. But here, it's just very good collocation to say flee the country. So I wanted to point that one out. So it basically just means to run away from the country, but it wouldn't sound right to say run away from the country. It's much more common to say flee the country. Let's take a look at the clip.
He grew up in Somalia. For years, there was no functioning government. It was rival warlords and militias and just anarchy. Dangerous and violent. There were bombings and attacks from the terrorist group Al-Shabaab, which is affiliated with Al-Qaeda. Abdi says for him, or really for any man in his 20s in Somalia, it's hard to stay out of the fight. You can't just be neutral and go about your life. He tells stories of Al-Shabaab members threatening him to join them or else. At one checkpoint, on the way to his mom's, they told him, basically, next time you come through here, you better be one of us. So it was that, or join the government forces who were fighting Al-Shabaab, or he could flee the country. You know those boats full of people who are trying to cross the Mediterranean to get to Europe, and sometimes they sink and hundreds of people drown? Abdi knows people who've gone on those boats, and on boats like them, to escape to Yemen.
Yes, I've lost 3 very good friends. And one of these friends had his child, less than a year old, with his wife. He knew how to swim, but he could not swim because his child was, he was trying to save his child and his wife, and then they were caught up in the sea and sharks.
We found out in this last clip that Abdi needed to leave Somalia and go to Kenya because he was afraid for his life in Somalia. It was very dangerous for him. There's all these warlords around, and he basically would have to join this army or be killed. So it's a very dangerous place for him to be. So for the rest of this story, it's quite important to understand that he's left Somalia, which is one country, and he's living in Kenya, which is another country, and it's safer, but it's not perfect for him. And so in this next clip, we're going to find out a little bit about his life in Kenya and what that's like for him. So there's 2 bits of language we're going to need to know to understand this clip. The first one is a concentration camp. A concentration camp is maybe similar to a prison. It's lots of people held in a place where they're not really able to leave. But a prison is somewhere people go after a trial and after kind of due process, or the law has been applied in a correct way. A concentration camp is maybe not really paying much attention to the law or human rights or anything like that. And so people will be taken there maybe without a trial or for bad reasons because of what race they are or what religion they are or something like that. So the most infamous concentration camps, the ones that most people have heard of, would be ones in Nazi Germany during World War II. But that's not the only type of concentration camp. There are other examples of this. So the people who are getting taken to this concentration camp in Nairobi aren't going to get killed there, but they're being gathered together and eventually they will be sent back to Somalia. And so for Abdi, if he gets taken to this place, they will kind of gather him up and they'll send him back to Somalia, and his life might be in danger if he goes back to Somalia. So it's not like a guaranteed death sentence. They're not going to kill him there, but it's still very dangerous and bad for him to get sent back. Especially as if he gets sent back, he can't win this visa lottery, or he can't use this visa lottery anymore. He can't get his green card and he can't go to the United States. The other bit of language you might not have heard in this is an obstacle course. Now, an obstacle course, literally, it's a place you go and you might have to climb over a wall, you might have to crawl under some things, you might have to swing on ropes, all sorts of different difficult things to do. Originally, an obstacle course was kind of that, like a physical obstacle course. But we also use it as kind of a metaphor. So in this story, Abdi isn't actually climbing over fences and doing all of these things physically, but he feels like he's in an obstacle course. There's a lot of difficult things he has to get through. And we can also use obstacle course basically to just mean you have to overcome a lot of difficulties. Let's take a look at the clip.
You sent me an email that had me really worried today. Tell me what happened.
It's crazy. I was actually chatting with some of the people in our apartment when these guys, we don't call them the police, we call them the guys. out of nowhere, they appeared there at the gate, and they asked us all to raise our hands up. And we were thinking like, okay, this is the end of it. We're gonna go there tonight.
By there, he means a place called Kasarani, a giant soccer stadium that Kenyan authorities and police were using as a makeshift jail to hold hundreds of refugees.
Like, oh my God, the next few couple of nights you're gonna be spending there in the concentration camp, and then they take you to Mogadishu. And okay, you're gonna miss your lottery. All that things were going through my mind.
This call happened on April 17th, 2014. Abdi had 96 days to go before his interview at the U.S. Embassy, which will be scheduled for July 22nd. Leah started calling him every day. He was worried for him. Like I say, over half the people who win this lottery never make it to the United States. Would Abdi succeed? Over the next 3 months, he faced a horrifying obstacle course. It's just like one seemingly impossible task after another. At several points, he's afraid for his life. Today, we bring you the story of one of the many people around the world who are desperately trying to make it to America and become one of us. Will Abdi do it? Stay with us.
So if you're anything like me, now that you've heard this, you think, oh, this is a really good story. I want to find out what happens next. And so in the next video, in this series, we will have a look at what happens to Abdi in the future. And we will kind of prime you to listen to this. But now that you've listened to this video, you should be ready to go and listen to the first part of the podcast on your own. So what you can do is you can go down into the description. You can find a link to the This American Life website where you can listen to this. You might also want to find it on an app on your phone and download it and listen to it. So you can listen to it anywhere. And we will also put a link to a transcript so you can kind of read along and listen at the same time. Thank you so much for watching. Like every person who watches these videos, it really means a lot to me and it really helps support what we're doing here and putting out free English resources for people. If you enjoyed this, if you want to find out what happens next, hit like and hit subscribe down below. I'll see you soon.